Paul George has never been one shy to share his opinions, and with the return of the Podcast P Show, he's been given the full platform to do just this. But the Sixers star continues to bring up one interesting prospect that has seen plenty of connection to the Sixers already. Does this confirm what we believe to be true, and will Ace Bailey be wearing a Sixers uniform when the draft is concluded there? Do want to dive a little bit deeper into each of these questions, so to reflect now that the dust has settled a bit, my feelings on Ace Bailey and where I'm at in this draft process overall, but do want to give Paul George his flowers. For starters here, Paul George has been on the Ace Bailey trade, that he has been talking about this, hyping this man up since midway through the season here. And to kind of reflect on that first take here, that he said, quote, he has big time talent. I love his upside. With Paul George going as far to say that he thinks it's a debate between Cooper Flagg or Ace Bailey for who the one pick should be. Once again, this being months ago, before the offseason even happened, before the Sixers were believed to have any chance at even getting that one pick there. But Paul George has certainly been banging this drum. Then another episode drops as of yesterday with Carmelo Anthony on the pod. Pretty cool listen. I did give it a listen through today, and he did have this quote coming up, talking about Ace Bailey saying, quote, his game translates as a go-getter, all-star. Put the ball in my hand last seconds. I want those moments. He's ISO ball ready. And I will lead this conversation by saying I do not want anyone on the Sixers organization, if Ace Bailey is here in Philadelphia, to be expressing those thoughts to Ace. That, to be clear here, there are weaknesses in Ace's game, and I understand the Ace haters are going to jump all into this. To dive into the full scouting report on Bailey before I reflect more on Paul George, did want to pull this up from Babcock, who's here, who is, shout out to Matt Babcock, a guy whose opinion I quite respect in the draft space, this being on Ace Bailey. So these strengths here, a 3-level scorer, that Bailey's ability to score effortlessly from beyond the arc, mid-range, and at the rim makes him a versatile offensive weapon. The defensive versatility, that he's capable of guarding multiple positions with his combination of size, length, and lateral mobility. The smooth shooting mechanics, that his fluid jumper combined with advanced footwork allow him to generate quality looks in various situations. His athleticism, he uses explosive athleticism to finish strong at the rim and disrupt plays defensively. And then his wing initiation ability showcases the ability to handle the ball and creates opportunities for himself and teammates. And just to add to these strengths a little bit deeper here, I think rebounding is not highlighted enough for how good of a rebounder he is and how competitive he is in that he attacks the glass. He's a guy that will go up and get rebounds in a way that is really appealing to me, and that's something I don't think has been brought up enough. I think the defensive versatility is even being undersold here, that I think at worst he's like a real deal 3-and-D style of defender, and meaning a guy that can float with opposing wings, and I do think he's more versatile on that. He gets his hands in passing lanes. He's really active on that side of the ball, and that's not things that you see all that often from freshmen there. Now, to get into the concerns, physical strength, number one, that he needs to add muscle to handle physicality at the next level and improve his ability to finish through contact. His shot selection. At times, Bailey settles for contested jumpers instead of attacking mismatches in the post or driving lanes. And I think that is a bit of an understatement that he does that quite often there. Number 3, the off-ball defensive awareness. Can lose track of his assignment when not directly involved in the play. The only thing that I will add here is I think a lot of that is him sort of cheating to cover up others, and he's a phenomenal weak side defender, that he will block shots. Like if there's a guy backing on the post on the right side of the floor, he's guarding on the left, he's more than willing to make that jolt across the lane and try and block that shot, and has had some success with it. Also going to be a nice chase down block guy on transition, which is really appealing to me as well. So I give him a little bit more leniency with that one. In the post-up game, while skilled on the perimeter, his post-up moves and refinement to utilize his game, utilize his size advantage fully. And the reason that I said that about not wanting these specific thoughts to get in his head right away here is I do think Ace needs to be coached pretty strategically off the bat here. Now, I am an Ace Bailey believer that if the Sixers are on the clock with the 3rd pick right now, that still would be my selection. And the reason that I say that here, I do think there's a clear pathway to him developing to everything he could possibly be as a basketball player, and I think the best pathway to that is in Philadelphia. For Ace specifically, I think the worst thing in the world for him would to end up on one of the Washington Wizards or Charlotte Hornets or even a Utah Jazz team where you kind of have the freedom to do whatever you want. We just saw that for a season at Rutgers. And as far as the isolation comment here, yes, it looks pretty. He also generated 0.77 points per possession in isolation that season. That's not good. That just straight up isn't. You want to be at least above 1.0 if you do want to be considered like an elite isolation guy. That's generally the number that you are shooting for. 0.77, not good enough, and you're going to be facing stiffer competition at the NBA level. Now, the reason that I say why I think it makes sense in Philadelphia for Ace specifically is the pathway that I see for him. He's got to buy in first off. And that is something that every NBA team will have a better feel for. I will add, I did talk to a couple people at Rutgers that from everything I've heard, like he's an all-in worker, a guy that like is a team first guy. And if anything, I've heard that Dylan Harper not quite as much in that camp here. Nothing negative per se about him, but if you want the first in, last out kind of guy, that's way more Ace Bailey fitting that bill, and the dude that is willing to take the team first. To give him a bit of pass for the season, I can't overstate how bad that Rutgers roster was outside of Bailey and Harper. And I don't think the coach did a particularly good job. Don't know him to any extent here. Did go up and watch a game in person there, and that is when my feelings about Ace Bailey really changed. I went into that game a little bit skeptical for all the legitimate concerns with Bailey, that he is too reliant on tough shots, that his shot selection, not good, that he doesn't pass pretty much whatsoever at this point. But what I walked away from that game was just blown away with the level of compete that this guy has. He's got a motor. He does care. That he looked to me like a guy that wants to play winning basketball. And when you have a 6'7" frame who can move the way he can move with some legitimate defensive instincts and of course the tough shot making ability, if you pair that with a guy who has that level of desire, I'm betting on that dude 10 times out of 10. And that is how I feel about Ace Bailey. Now, to walk through this a little bit deeper, this is not saying anyone who doesn't think that is wrong. And I also am very open to the concept of moving down. Now, I put a little asterisk next to that comment because what is a necessity to me is the Sixers walk away with a key young talent from this draft. That I do think it is important to begin to shift these timelines. That yes, this Sixers team is still all in and contending next year. You do have Paul George. You do have Joel Embiid. You're committed to that level of money. And by the way, let's not let Tyrese Maxey begin to be upset by some losing habits that this team has. If there is another season, if next year's season went like this past year's season, there's going to start to be some problems in Philadelphia from guys like Maxey. And I know from a personality standpoint that he's not that kind of guy, but his management certainly is. That is a mover and shaker and wants to make sure that they get their people in the right spots. And Tyrese certainly is a guy who fits that criteria here. But with all that being said here, that you have this next generation of talent coming. Jared McCain has a bright future. Tyrese Maxey, a key part of that youth movement, could potentially be the number one or the 1B type guy when you start to form this next generation of contender. Even a guy like Quentin Grimes and Justin Edwards I'll throw in the mix for having a bright future with this team, and that third pick is a very valuable chance to add to that. So when looking at things and to take a peek at sort of the mock draft here, I am not willing for this Sixers team to move out in a way that you don't land one of these notable names here. From a salary cap perspective, it would be very advantageous for the Sixers to drop down a couple spots to help their case with bringing back Ersan Yabusele specifically and make it easier to retain Quentin Grimes. Now, all those numbers are still pretty fluid at this time. There is not a clear consensus on what the market will look like for either one of those guys. Grimes going to be really interesting in that category. Yabusele, they're not in the best spot to re-sign, to be perfectly upfront about it, but we don't know what his market value is or how many teams around the league value him that highly. I've seen even some speculation from cap guys that I respect. Shout out to Yossi Goslin, who really talked about this, talking about that he could end up just being like a $5 million or less guy. And if that is the case, the Sixers should be able to swing that there. But nonetheless, to keep it on the draft concept, these are the quality of young players that I need the Sixers to walk away with one. Now, one potential mock trade that did pop out, and I'm very open to this sort of concept here. Shout out to Sam Vinici here, who tweets out this trade or mentioned this trade in one of his videos here. He did mention like this is not a source thing or anything like this, just something he's theorizing that if he's in the Sixers' shoes, the type of trade that he'd be looking to do. And this being Herb Jones in the 7th pick coming to Philadelphia in exchange for Kelly Oubre and Andre Drummond, and then the 3rd pick there. And of course, I did drop a video yesterday sort of speaking about the outlook from the player option perspective, the likelihood of a guy like Andre Drummond being traded there for these same reasons, that it does come down to the salary. You have to match that amount of money coming in and out. And with both Oubre and Drummond seemingly committed to wanting to opt into their player options, the Sixers, this is their way of kind of countering that. If they don't see them as a part of the vision, I certainly feel that way about Andre Drummond. Not as bullish on that as Kelly Oubre, as I'm okay with Oubre being around. I think he gets a worse reputation than he deserves overall. But if it is a trade like this, you sign me up for this 10 times out of 10. If you're talking about bringing in Herb Jones, moving down to 7 just in exchange for those 2 and 3, it saves you some money, and you still got to look at some of these guys. Then we can have the conversation. Con Knipple at that 7th pick there. I would be totally okay with that if that is the trade that comes down. Even a guy like Common Maluak I like quite a bit. Derek Queen, we can have an interesting conversation about. Trey Johnson, if he drops those far. Those are the type of talents that I'd be cool with keeping one of them, but you have to. This is not a situation where I want the Sixers to be trading the 3rd pick in a Kevin Durant package or bringing in another aging vet. They got to add young talent, continue building for this future. And maybe the best move is just handing the keys to Ace Bailey and seeing what happens. So we will see if Paul George continues to speak highly about this potential new teammate. It is a little bit telling to me that he's so upfront about this, and who knows when these were recorded, if it was before the lottery or what the case may be. But the fact that Paul George continues to throw these into conversations, I do wonder what the conversations are behind the scenes. If there is some communication with Daryl Morey, I doubt Daryl cares to that extent. But the other part that I will note here is Joel Embiid was very open in his recruiting of Paul George. Paul George, a different kind of recruiting here, but is being very open in his belief in Ace Bailey. So who knows what kind of pull he has in the organization at this point in the game. I doubt much after how the first season went, but I will note Daryl Morey does make it a point to make his stars happy, and it would not shock me whatsoever. He is bending over backwards trying to please everybody here. So ultimately, still a lot of time until the draft. We will see how things shape out from there. But shout out to Paul George for continuing to stick up for Ace Bailey, and shout out to Ace Bailey, man. I think this guy has been dragged through the mud sometimes worse than he's deserved. I think both camps, the very pro Ace guys and the very anti Ace guys, are quite argumentative in their sort of spot on it. I sit a little bit neutral, certainly more on the Ace side here. I don't think you're an idiot if you don't believe Ace Bailey is the guy, but I certainly see the legitimate concerns there. But at the end of the day, if you put me on the stand right now with the 3rd overall pick, that is the guy that I would draft and put in a Sixers uniform for hopefully the foreseeable future. But let me know what you guys think about all that. Is Ace Bailey the guy? Does it bother you, Paul George, the way that he is talking? And would that type of trade, like that with the Pelicans, be one that appeals to you? One more that I'll throw out there, sort of the same model here. A trade with the Houston Rockets is one that really appeals to me. And of course, them holding the 10th pick there. If you can toss me Tyrese in, we're swapping 3 and 10 and sort of the same construct of deal. That is the type of move that I would be open for at this point of it. So let me know what you guys think about all that. Appreciate you guys tuning in this video as always. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button if you have not already. Drop a like on this video here. I'll be back talking to you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.